One of the best things that came out of the November balance patch is the buff on the tier 10 assault cruisers. They have received a new skill per level bonus that will give them extra shield or armor resistance. Now this is going to make them a lot more like the EVE Online tier 2 assault cruisers, like Vagabond, Cerberus and ships like that. And honestly, I am all in for that. It will make these ships a lot more interesting and a lot more unique. So today I will start with the Caracal 2, or you can call this ship the Cerberus. There's a big chance that they will change the looks of these ships in one of the December updates, because there is a visual effects update coming in December, so very exciting to see what happens. So let's take a look at the stats of the ship. Roll bonus plus 5 seconds, damage control activation time. Advanced medium missile torpedo pressure bonus will give you plus 5% medium missile torpedo flight velocity, minus 6% medium missile torpedo activation time. Advanced cruiser command bonus will give you plus 5% flight velocity, and the advanced cruise defense upgrade will give you plus 5% shield thermal resistance and plus 3% shield kinetic resistance, which is honestly really nice. Overall, we are in for a very interesting time in this game. I really like the new stats on these ships. Okay, let's go to the attributes and fittings. Now the Caracal 2 has 1 drone, 5 high slots, 3 medium slots, 5 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. 16,000 hit points is the overall defense. The Caracal 2 is of course a shield tank like most Caldari ships. Capacitors 2470 gigajoules. The capacitor recharge time is about 558 seconds. The maximum recharge rate is 11.07 gigajoule per second. Maximum lock target 7, signature rate 89.1, scan resolution 276, sensor strength 18.9, flight velocity 243 meters per second, warp speed 3.0 astronomical units per second. Overall, really solid. I feel like the Caracal 2 might suffer from low capacitor issues, but we will see how that will go when I undock and when I play around with this ship. But the stats are looking really nice, and they are quite comparable to the other assault cruisers. Okay, now let's take a look at the build of this ship. Now I have 497.82 DPS with the rapid missiles. Of course I'll have to change the implant. I think I don't use the implant. I don't use the missile implant at the moment. We'll have to change that. 5.1 km per second is the flight velocity. Explosion velocity 170 meters per second. Explosion radius 27.54. Flight time 5.1 seconds. And the range 26.3 kilometers. Really solid stats on the rapid missiles. These are the C-type rapid missiles, and overall they should be doing a lot of damage on small ships like frigates, destroyers and even cruisers. 1 scrambler, 1 web, 1 large Nosferatu. This ship has a lot of power grid. 1 afterburner, large booster, damage control and dual adaptives. Basically a classic shield tank setup for a assault cruiser. Now for the rigs, this time I have 2 normal rigs, anti-thermal and anti-EM reinforcer, and there is 1 integration rig that is going to give me extra EM, kinetic and thermal resistance, as well as it will improve the capacitor time on the shield booster. This rig does, oh my apologies, it actually increases the cycle time on the boosters. That will make the ship more tanky. Now in the engineering rigs I have 1 auxiliary thruster, power router and a capacitor control circuit. Overall I like this combination, but if you plan to use this exact build, then you might not be able to fit the normal medium missiles and the heavy assault missiles. So there's a chance that you will have to change some of these rigs. Now the defense 41,315, 59, 70, 61 and 54% resistance on the shield. 10,448 is the overall shield hit point. Honestly, really solid stats. I am really happy with the outcome and with the number that I have on this ship. Capacity from it and 9 seconds, although You don't have to worry about that low number because in the real scenario you will last a lot longer with smart shield booster usage and with smart capacity management. Also a very nice thing to learn in this game. Okay, now let me undock and let me show the active stats on the Caracal 2 or on the Cerberus. I mean, at this moment might as well call it Cerberus because probably going to be one very soon. Okay, 71,000 hit points, 82, 87, 83 and 80% shield resistance. Honestly, looking pretty good, really solid. And the thing is, you can actually use a passive shield tank with a large extender with this type of resistance, and you can even increase that by using rigs. That will increase the overall shield hit points. 1.2 kilometers per second is the afterburner speed. Okay, let's take a look at the damage control. Panic button stats: 94, 96, 94 and 93% resistance. 211,000 hit points. Yeah, this is going to be really tanky for a short period of time. Basically immortality for about 18 seconds, which is very nice. Okay, let me dock and let me show you a different build that I have prepared for this ship. Now, with heavy assault missiles or torpedo launchers, you will have a lot more DPS, but the missiles are going to be a little bit slower, explosion velocity will be a little bit slower, and radius will be a little bit higher, and of course the range will be drastically lower, but 14 kilometers is still really solid, honestly. Now, the power grid is almost all filled up, and I even had to change the rigs into dual ancillary power grid routers. So if you plan to use the heavy assault missiles on this ship, you will have to sacrifice some of the capacitors for extra power grid. Same can be said about the normal medium missiles. They also use a bit more power grid. And with the normal medium missiles you will have extra range, they are fast, but explosion velocity and explosion radius is going to be a little bit lower than the radius on the rapid missile launchers. Now, as for the implant, well, of course, you will have to use the warhead charge. Now, I'll be honest, I really like the missile implant. It's really fun to use. Now, it might not be as flashy, it might not give you 50,000 DPS like on the Caracal, but it's ridiculously fun to use, and I really like it. So, you can switch between sniper mode, precision mode, you can switch between kinetic missiles, thermal missiles, explosive missiles. Now, I usually like to use explosive and thermal missiles. Explosive for arbors and hulls, and thermal for shields, although in some cases thermal can be used against all damage types. But keep in mind that reactive shield or reactive armor hardeners will counter the specific damage type that you have on your missiles. The general units are focused on speed, DPS, on tank, basically the classic general unit setup that I use on my ships. 2 general units and implant level 15 is honestly more than enough. You don't have to go for level 30 or level 45. Now, the large Nosferatu is going to have 19.2 kilometer range, and I think the large Nosferatu will be able to sustain the ship for a longer period of time. The shield booster, 1152 hit points recovered about every 7 seconds, which is going to recover about 10% every cycle, and that is honestly pretty tanky on these resistance stats. Now, you can also use a ballistic control, or even use dual ballistic controls. That will significantly increase the DPS, but it will actually reduce your tank. Now, I personally like to use the tank build on my Stabber 2 or on my Vagabond, depends how you like to call the ship. For now it will be called Stabber 2, but at the same time I also like to call it Vagabond because that's what it's going to be. Now, with a DPS build, you can easily run the high tier missions in high sec. I find it's more fun to run the high sec missions in cruisers and battle cruisers than in battleships. The cruisers have a lot of very nice performance. They're good speed tanks, so you can easily clear them AFK if it has to be AFK, but they're really solid for that job. And some really solid DPS with the normal medium missiles, 1,200. Now let me show you the stats on the explosive missiles. Now the DPS will be drastically higher, 1,500 with the explosive or thermal missiles, which is really nice. You have a lot of very nice DPS on the ship, as well as having some really decent tank. It's interesting because this is a tank build that still has really nice DPS. Could be perfect for small fleets and missions, even in solo PvP. Now in the sniper mode, 59.95 kilometer range with the missiles, but the DPS is a little bit lower. And with the precision mode, the explosion velocity and radius should be drastically improved. The DPS, of course, will be a little bit lower. But the explosion radius, 48.2 meters, has been improved. 81 meters per second is the explosion velocity, which honestly is really nice. Okay, let's dock and let's change the normal medium missiles into rapid missiles.
Docking request
now,
accepted.
Rapid missiles in the precision mode will wreck frigates because their explosion radius is going to be really small, 13.77 meters. Okay, let's undock and let's take a look at the active stats, at the DPS. So far, I'm really happy with the Caracal 2.
Undocking.
A really solid ship, honestly, a really solid ship so far. At least on paper, we will see how it will perform when I go and run a mission with this thing. Okay, let me quickly rearrange the modules, just because the game does separate them every time I undock for some reason. Alright, let's take a look at the active stats. The DPS is 806.95, which is still really good for rapid missiles. 27.54 meter is the explosion radius, 170 meter per second is the explosion velocity. With the range mode, with the sniper mode, 34.19 kilometers, really nice. And now with the precision mode, I think it's 13.77. The DPS 353.25. Okay, 13.77, really nice. At 26.3 kilometers. Okay. Now let's go and see the maximum possible DPS with the explosive missiles, 983 DPS. Okay. And with the second ballistic control, the DPS is 1163.18. For rapid missiles, this is really solid. Okay, the stats are still the same because this is the normal mode. Overall, really solid rapid missile stat. Now, my favorite weapon system, heavy assault missiles. How much DPS can I get out of assault missiles? Well, let's find out. 1,200 cold DPS while docked. This is about to be hilarious. Let's undock and let's see what's going to be the maximum possible DPS on this thing. I used the heavy assault missiles on the Ortus. I love the Ortus with those missiles.
Undocking.
And I think this ship will have about the same performance as the Ortus, but it's going to be a lot cheaper and it's going to be a lot more tankier. The tank on the Ortus is horrible. Let's be real here, but this thing actually does have some form of tank, and that opens up a lot of possibilities with these ships. Okay, let's check out the stats on this thing. Now, when everything is on default, the DPS is 91.42. With the explosive missiles and with the range mode, 172 DPS at 19.31 kilometers, really nice range. With the precision mode, the explosion radius will be drastically reduced, 43.3 meters. on 14.85 kilometers. Really solid. This should hurt. This should hurt even frigates. Okay, now full DPS, 1473.27 DPS with one, and with the second ballistic control, the DPS is 1747.92 with a full-on tank build. This is actually really solid. If you want, you can go a full DPS build, and a full DPS build will give you about, I would say, 3.4 thousand DPS, which does rival the Ortus quite a bit, and this is going to be a pretty scary little cruiser, because it still can be tanky, unlike the Ortus that is paper. Okay, now it will be time to have some fun with this thing. Let's see how it actually... Now, I know a lot of you guys have asked me, what does it actually mean to be a skilled EVE player? What does make someone skilled at EVE? Now, having like 80,000 kills is pretty nice to look at. Having couple trillion destroyed in ISK is also really nice to look at, but that's just a number. It really doesn't show the whole picture. But if that's the case, then what does make someone a skilled player, or what does make someone a not so skilled player? The most important thing is the decisions that you make in a combat situation. It's really important that you know the limits of your ship, really important to know what your ship can do, what your ship can't do. You have to know what targets to avoid, what targets to engage, because there will be ships that will be equipped specifically to counter your ship, and no matter how good your build is, no matter what build you have, that one ship will always counter you. EVE is basically a big rock, paper, scissors game. So if your ship is a rock and if your opponent is a paper, then you will lose no matter what you do. And in that case, it's important to avoid the fight. It's also important to understand all of the ship stats. You have to know what your target has to offer, and it's also important to know what kind of build you might be facing. All that does come with experience, and with time all players do learn that. Now, one thing that will prevent players from actually becoming skilled is their own ego. We've had, I would say, I'm doing a wild guess here, a couple hundred, perhaps even a couple thousand players that came to our home system thinking that we are easy targets, while in the end they end up losing their ship. Now, losing your ship is, you know, nothing serious. I lose ships, everyone does. It's part of the game, and you know, it's part of the whole learning process. It's how the game works. The important thing is to acknowledge the mistakes you made in the fight, and of course to correct them next time. That way you learn from the mistakes and you will do better in the next fight. Now, we had a lot of players that had their ego above everything else, and a lot of them were self-proclaimed ace pilots. I remember one of them actually said that they're like in the top 3 PvP players in the game, something silly like that. And they came to our home system, and of course, well, they met a bunch of dreadnoughts, they met a bunch of Macarials, Revelations, Balgons, you know, things that you usually encounter in our home system. Now, again, like I said before, losing the ship is fine, but what's not okay is being absolutely ignorant about the mistakes that you can make in the fight. So most of these players didn't learn from their mistake, and well, unfortunately they did decide to go and harass us. They decided to go and lie about us, to create drama, and to basically put themselves as the victim and making us look like the bad guys. So that's something that a skilled pilot would never do. Being level-headed is also something that you will have to get used to while fighting, because the player who does panic first usually does lose the fight. And again, all that does come with time. You don't have to rush towards that. You don't have to worry if you make mistakes. I mean, I still make mistakes after 3 years of playing this game. I still do make mistakes, and I always laugh at them. And if I do end up losing a ship, the only person to be blamed is myself. I never blamed anyone else for losing a ship. It's not something that someone who's skilled would do. Players will have to acknowledge if they do make a mistake. After all, this EVE is kind of like real life in some cases. You really have to understand where you went wrong, and you really have to, if you want to do better, you will have to fix that. Now, that would be my short explanation on what I believe matters in this game. Having nice kills is nice, having a lot of kills is nice. It's nice to look at, really, but in the end, that really doesn't mean much. I've had players who told me that they had, like, I don't know, couple 3 undestroyed or something like that. They came to a home system and died in like 10 seconds. Not even against 10 ships. They died. One of them died to my Balgon, I believe, in 10 seconds with the interceptor, and they did not understand what went wrong. So yeah, having a lot of kills in the end doesn't really mean that you are a good player. It's the decision that you make. It's the decision that you make in the fight that's going to make you a good player. Now back to the Cerberus here. I got a little sidetracked. My apologies. Overall, as you could see in the last 5 minutes of me rolling this mission, this thing shreds. Dual ballistic controls with a tank build does work really well. Now, if I go and swap this build for a full DPS build, I could easily get about 3,500 DPS on this ship. And that is honestly very impressive. This little cruiser can replace a high-sec battlecruiser or battleship very easily. Now, if I were to go and remove the resistance module, the resistance rigs for DPS rigs, I would have to rely on the speed tank to keep this ship afloat. Now, so far I can tell you that the speed tank works. You don't really have to go really fast inside of missions to avoid a lot of damage. I just prefer to have ships fast, just in case if I get jumped by another player. In that case, having a fast ship is going to be very important. Now, for high sec, you can go full DPS and you can clear this without a problem, very quickly. However, for low sec, I would still prefer tank over DPS for low sec. Basically something like I made on the Phantasm. I really like the Phantasm that I made a couple days ago. That thing is tanky, it's fast, and it's PvP ready, really difficult to catch. So having a tank build for low sec and for storyline missions is going to be really nice. Now I will do a storyline mission with this ship using the tank build, just to show you that it's possible, that it's not difficult, and that you don't really have to fly a big battleship. That's a very tasty and very easy target. Cruisers are the perfect ships to run missions with because of their agility. They still have very good DPS and they still clear them in a very decent time frame, and they offer safety. Something that battleship doesn't offer is safety. If you don't believe me, well, take a look at the Barrage Macariel series that I do. We farm battleships. That's how easy it is to catch a battleship running a mission. But a cruiser is giving us a hard time because catching these things moving is annoying, and 90% of them easily escape. So it's always nice to have a ship that is going to clear those missions, that can offer safety. Now, for smaller ships, I like to swap the normal mode into the precision mode that will increase the damage application on the small ships. The web and scrambler does help at applying damage even more, and so far that seems to be working really well. Using the missile implant with the heavy assault missiles is actually one of the more satisfying things that you can do in this game. Now this is a more serious mission. I think it's like the 6 million special mission or something like that. And so far I'm going through those ships like a hot knife through butter. And I honestly love it. Now you do get the precision and the sniper mode right about when you unlock the implant. Level 15 is more than enough to get one of the, I think, to get the explosive missiles. Actually, most of the time when I think about it, I would use the explosive missiles all the time, and I would use the normal Omni mode for breaking shields, because, well, when you break your target's shield, and if they are a shield tank, then they will probably have a big explosive hole on armor, and you will be applying full damage on armor. Sometimes against shield that can also work, but most shields have really solid explosive resistance, so Omni mode or EM or thermal missiles for shields, explosive or thermal missiles for armor. But in my case, I personally like to use explosive missiles. They just shred. Now, how does this ship compare with the Ortus? That's a very good question, actually. The Ortus costs like 5 times more. The Ortus has the best missile stats, that's true, but the one thing that the Ortus lacks is tank. The Ortus doesn't have a good tank at all, and the capacitor in the Ortus is also pretty bad. So with this ship you get extra power grid. You can slap a large Nosferatu, a large booster at the same time, while still having really solid resistances and really solid tank, which makes the Caracal 2 a very attractive ship, honestly. If you want to fly the Ortus, I usually say that you should practice with Bellicose 2 or the Bellicose 3, because those ships are much cheaper to lose. But nowadays I would actually say you can practice on the Caracal 2. This ship is very forgiving on mistakes. The only thing that I see it being on the weaker side is definitely the capacitor, although it's nowhere as bad as on the Ortus. On the Ortus you can't fit 2 large modules. On this little ship you can. And I'm actually starting to like this ship more and more. Now I fight the Stabber 2, or the Vagabond, with the Sleeper Core, and that is my PvP cruiser. I like it, it's pretty solid, and in some cases I would say probably the best tier 10 cruiser at the moment, but again, every tier 10 cruiser has its own thing, so it's not really accurate to say that the Stabber is the best one, or if this is the best one. I will fly all of them, and I will give you my honest opinion on all of these ships. Of course, after flying all of them, that way I can give you the best decision on what ship you can go for, what ship can work best for you. I'm waiting on the drone buff this week, in 2 or 3 days from now, and then I will fly the Vaxor, because right now the drones are a little bit slow. Let's say they're a little bit slow. Okay, they're a little bit slow, and I want to give you a honest opinion and a honest ship review, if you wanna call it like that, on the tier 10 cruisers. So far, I really like the Caracal. It's an amazing ship, as you can see, clears missions without a problem, has really good tank, it's fast, it looks very nice, that's also important, looks also very nice on this ship, and it does have a lot of flexibility. So you can basically fit this ship for DPS, for tank. In both cases it will work flawlessly. So am I going to be flying the Caracal 2 for PvP? You know, when I think about it, I think I might actually fly the Caracal 2 in PvP. And right now I'm saving ISK for some upgrades on the Hyperion, but when I am done with the Hyperion, well, you will see a new cruiser join the party for PvP. So with that being said, hope that you enjoyed, hope that the fits that I show you here are helpful, and hope that you enjoyed this little run with the Caracal. If you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe, and with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.